Well, hello, live people on the YouTube or the people watching the recorded version on the YouTube. If you're here live, then welcome. If you're here watching on the YouTube side, you may want to go to professormesser.com/live, and you'll be able to follow along with the live chat, which I'm talking to right now. Links are on the chat on the live page. Let's change the website. We got the podcast intro done. We can close that out. We need to change the website, though. We need to change what we have for the banner at the top. So let's do that. It's one of these links. There it is. All right. Haven't done this in a few weeks. It's almost like starting over. How does this work again? Where are the buttons? Where is everything? Hello, chat room. Hello, everyone. I see you there. Let's change this. It's under settings, I believe it is. I need to get a new bar that goes across the top. Got to get this updated with some new features so I can have it automatically do this for me. We are in September. And let's start it. We're going to say it started Monday, but it didn't. We're going to stop it today. That was not today. That's August. Let's stop it today once we're an hour in, because at that point it's too late. My A+ security group is live. Let's change that. See, what I need to do is automate this. It can be on a schedule. I'm working on that. Let's save those changes, and that'll be at the top of the site. Now everyone will know. Look, Alpha's in the house. So for those of you looking for international coverage, we span from Tallahassee to Alpha. I got Ken in Alpha. I think we've said that before. Or near there anyway. I got Ken all up in there. All up in the Mariana, Bluntstown area doing things. All right, that's set up on the website. The live Q&A is available at professormesser.com/QA. Hello, Ohio. Knee, Ohio. I'm assuming that means Northeast. I don't think there is a place called Knee. Maybe there is. It's it's where the Knights are. We've got Orlando here. Welcome. I got Ken in Orlando as well. My brother's in Orlando, working for Disney. Shocking. Atlanta is here. We really got the southern U.S., the southeast covered right here. Let's see if we no hurricane today. I've been watching the map. Hurricane's not quite near Tallahassee. We're in pretty good shape. Did not hit us. I have to remember how this works again. So let's do a camera check. That would be good. There I am. Hi. Hello. Welcome. There's things making noise over here, letting me know. We can turn that off. That we are ready to go. I should probably put up a presentation here so that we could show this in the camera check. We should probably get this also set up to make sure that it will work with the camera check, and it does. Camera 3, there we go. There's our Q&A, very nice. Camera 4, the presentation. Hey, this works. How about that? You leave for 3 weeks, and this is what happens. So let's see what else we got. We've got recordings going on. I've already done the podcast intro just before we went live. That's why I was a few minutes late. 4 minutes or so, and we're going to get this thing started. So there you go. See, a clay saw guy almost looked like me, huh? How do you know it wasn't me? Could have been me. You don't know. Well, because you were in Orlando last week. Yeah, it wasn't me. My brother does not look like me. So you would not be able to pick him out. Maybe our mannerisms are similar because they are. Our style of talk, somewhat similar. But I don't think we look that much alike. Not enough. If you saw us next to each other, you could probably figure it out. It's one of those things. But separately, probably not going to happen. Probably not. He has all his hair, for example. So that's how that works. So all of this is working out. We've got things happening. Things are here. This is working. That's working. Folks are here watching. Let's make sure people are here. Be nice to look at the at the analytics. Analytics are here. Right there. There's our there's people. See, you're there. It's all good in the neighborhood. We've got more people watching, joining. We got 3 minutes before we get started. Let some folks show up. Top of the hour. I'm pretty prompt with starting. There's none of this, let's wait 10 more minutes for people to join the call kind of thing. I don't run meetings that way. My meetings start at the top of the hour, and if you don't make it, you miss the beginning. And then I try to get through it as quickly as possible. I never do hour-long meetings. If it lasts an hour, that's different. If it lasts 30 minutes, we're done 30 minutes. This one, however, this one will be a couple hours. Probably so. After this, I've got to go to the vet. I have a doggie that I'm picking up at the vet who's getting all well. So I've got to go get her and then back to the house. It's a busy day. Is it going to rain? I haven't even checked. These are the things you should probably do before going live so that you would know what's going on. Let's pull this down. Very low percentage. That's probably because all the rain's over at the hurricane, at the not a hurricane, is it? It's more of a tropical depression. Did it ever make hurricane when it hit land? I think it was just barely going to. Not sure. I've been so focused on getting this going today, I haven't been paying attention. There's West Coast. San Diego checked in. Category 1, did it tip over? I think it was at 70 last I checked, so 74 is Category 1. So that would do it. Oh, I need to make myself invisible, or else this is going to be a lot of clicking that I have to do. There we go. See, Winter Haven checking in. See, Apopka is where my brother is. So that's where. Holland. See, now we've got truly international. Winter Haven could almost be international. If you ever been there, it's kind of how it goes. What else do we need to have ready here? I think we're good. Everything's working. You'll notice those have been watching the previous weeks, the previous month. My screen on my iPad has been broken. You can see I finally got a replacement screen. It actually looks nice. It's not broken anymore. So enough of your cards and letters. That took me 4 hours to replace. I'd never replaced a screen in an iPad. It's a treat. But now I could probably do it faster now. I could probably figure it out much quicker. You never know. First time through, you're going to break something. Always concerned. The fact that it even worked is remarkable to me because it's a mess to replace the screen. I think it cost me $300 to do it myself. It would cost $500 to take it somewhere else. I could probably go either way with that one, quite honestly. That's well worth the money. It's quite a challenge. But I think I got a pretty good screen on it, which was my biggest concern. I think it's about time we should get this thing going, though. It is top of the hour, and let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2018 Professor Messer A+ Study Group, coming to you from the world headquarters of Messer Studios here in Tallahassee, Florida. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this next hour of Q&A. This is a live interactive Q&A stream. I'll be asking you questions through the magic of the internet. You'll be able to answer these questions, and we'll all be able to watch this as it goes along, surprisingly enough. We have also another hour after that. I open up the phone lines just for questions where you can ask any question about anything. It can be about certifications or IT career, but it could be about whatever you'd like to talk about. Not that I'll answer anything that you would ask, but you could ask anything. Not sure how that benefits you, but that's where we are anyway. Let's get going with some of this information that I have for you. We're talking today specifically about the A+ exam. So we're going to talk all about the details of the A+ and what you're going to need to know to pass this exam. Pretty important. So make sure that you know that. This is one where I have also live streams going out on YouTube right now. But if you're on YouTube, you may want to move over to professormesser.com/live because a chat room is there where we can talk back and forth over that chat. You'll notice there's no chat on the YouTube side. Also, if you're watching this, it's not Wednesday and it's not 12 noon my time here on the East Coast, then this is a replay and you will not be able to participate in the interactive part, but you can still follow along and maybe ask the questions, get them answered yourself. You'll be able to make that happen. Don't forget to subscribe on the YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube. I'm sure there's a lot of videos that will be coming out shortly. I'm giving you fair warning. It'd be nice if you subscribed and you were notified when those new videos hit, especially since you're on the A+ study group. That will probably be the next set of videos that are released. We can also have daily pop quiz questions available for A+. Just follow me on the Twitter. Go to professormesser.com/Twitter and you can do that. And unfortunately, I have the voucher link there. Unfortunately, the voucher link no longer available. Just found out about that. So although it's there on the screen, unfortunately not available to take advantage of at the moment. Maybe we'll get another voucher discount that I can make available. I'm looking for one of those right now. I will be sometime in this next hour providing you with a special code word that you can use to get a certified CEU from me. I will send you an email that I've digitally signed, which verifies that you must have watched this for 1 hour of webinar categorized CEU credit. So that might be something worthwhile if you're someone who is collecting CEUs. I realize these days a lot of you are taking the Cert Master CE, which is about 4 to 6 hours. You pay one price and you're done. You're recertified for 3 years. Nobody's collecting CEUs anymore. But if you do, if maybe you still are, because you still can, and maybe you're using these CEUs for other things, just keep listening sometime during this first hour, and I'll explain to you exactly how you would receive that particular email message from me. The current A+ exam is the 22901 and the 22902. You have to pass both of those exams to become A+ certified. This version of the exam was released on December the 15th, 2015. So this is something also you need to know, because usually they update these exams about every 3 years. So we would expect sometime near the end of this year, there may be a new release of the exam. One thing to keep in mind is even if they release a new version of the exam, they keep the old one around usually for about 6 months. So if you are studying for your A+ exam right now, please continue to study. If you have not started studying for the A+ exam, jump right in. You can study this current version and become certified. The version of this exam is going to be around until summer of next year. So you've got plenty of time. We're talking at least 9 months until that exam goes away. And whether you pass the existing exam or a newer exam, you get exactly the same certification. So it doesn't matter which one you happen to go with. There are a number of ways that you can renew your exam after this point. You can also see here that you've got renewal exams like there is an A+ renewal exam. Maybe you love taking exams. I sure do. Well, you can too. And by taking that single exam, you can renew your A+. There's also a higher level CompTIA exam. If you take the Network Plus or Security Plus or any of the higher level CompTIA exams, you also will automatically renew the older or the lower level exams, which would be the A+ in this example. Or as I mentioned, you can take a higher level third-party exam, maybe a Cisco exam or a Microsoft exam. That would give you CEUs. And of course, you can earn CEUs in other ways, such as watching this study group, for example. There's also, as I mentioned, the Cert Master CE, all an online process. You go through this 3 to 6 hour renewal and poof, you're renewed. So if you're getting to the last day, the last few hours of the last day, and you really want to keep that certification, there's the method you can use. That's probably the one I would use if I had to do this. Am I lazy? I wouldn't say lazy. I would say efficient. That's what I would go with. It just seems easier for me than paying the extra money, collecting the CEUs, or doing any of those other things. Or maybe if you're someone who you're taking a higher level exam anyway, maybe that's the better way to go. The point is you have options. Now, the thing you have to keep in mind if you're planning to earn your A+ certification is there are 2 separate exams, the 22901 and the 22902. And there are many different topics associated with both of those. Both exams are 90 minutes long. You will get a maximum of 90 questions. It could be fewer than that. You'll notice that the A+ 22901 asks you or requires you to get a passing score of 675 on a scale between 100 and 900. That doesn't make sense. I think that they meant for it to not make sense. It's difficult to determine exactly how many questions are really needed to answer correctly because the questions are worth a different number of points and the point scale is a little askew. We also can see the passing score a little bit different for the 22902. You have to earn a 700 to pass that as well. Also, pop quizzes online if you want to test your Q&A skills. Right now, it's just the A+ because we just converted over the Network Plus and Security Plus to the new versions. I'll be putting new versions of those questions online shortly, but the A+ is still available for you to take. Go to professormesser.com/popquiz. They're free, no registration. Hundreds of questions are there, something you can go through and see how well you can remember some of these topics from these study groups. This study group itself is also available to watch on a replay form with the video and everything, all just by going to professormesser.com. Some of you like having an audio-only version, so there is a podcast version. If you go to professormesser.com/podcast, you will see the podcast links for the A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups, and that's a good place you can go to add it to your favorite podcast listening application. Today, we're going to be doing QA. So now let's get into interactive Q&A. The way you would do this is open up a new browser window or a tab and go to professormesser.com/QA. There's also a mobile app that you can use for this. You can download that from your favorite app store, from Google Play or from the Apple App Store. You're looking for the Socrative student app. Socrative is the name of the service we are using. The student app is the one you would be using. You may also see a teacher app there. That's the one for me. You want to get the student app so that you'll be able to use this as well. And if you're able to make all of those things happen, then you will see a question will magically appear that asks which of these would be the best use of a loopback plug. And you'll see a number of options that are available on the screen. Those options would be A, find the other end of an Ethernet cable, B, test the interface of a router, C, troubleshoot a motherboard startup process, D, check a power supply voltage, and E, perform a wire map. So you've got all of these options. I interactively, as you can see, as things are moving on the screen, you can see what everybody is guessing or answering or any of those other pieces. All of those are here. I can see that 82% of you have said B, test the interface of a router. Now, if you were here last month or during the August study group, then this is one of the questions from there. So maybe you can recognize that. Maybe it's one you're familiar with already. You can see 84% of you answering B would probably lend us to thinking maybe that's what people are answering is the right or correct question. 10% of you said find the other end of an Ethernet cable. So this is the process we will use as we go through this study group to help figure out what do we do next? How's this going to work? What should you answer on these questions? This is a great place to go for all of the questions. You don't have to change your screen. You don't have to change anything. You stay on this page or you stay on this app and you'll be able to answer these questions. So for those of you in the chat room asking, how do I answer the questions? That's how you do it. See how that works? ProfessorMesser.com/QA will be your best place to go. The link to that also is on ProfessorMesser.com/live. So that may get you to the right place as well. Loopback plugs are pretty useful things. You will find them very useful for testing physical ports. This is a good example of testing a serial port, Ethernet connections, fiber connections. You can see fiber loopbacks are there. These are a little bit different than crossover cables. They're taking everything going out of a single interface and looping it back into the same device. So you're not connecting two devices together. You're connecting one device to itself. You're looping back to yourself. So whenever you're using a loopback plug, you're really testing to see how well it's able to receive information that has been sent. Ideally, it should receive exactly what it has sent. That might lend us to think that maybe if we're not receiving what we've sent, there's maybe something wrong with that interface. And in fact, on this particular question, which asks which of these would be the best use of a loopback plug, testing the interface of a router B, 86%, 87% now. You guys got that one absolutely right. So that's the process. Stay on that page. I will automatically make these questions change magically as we go along. We've got plenty to go through. What I usually will do as the first question, though, is I will give you a performance-based question. For those of you already familiar with CompTIA exams, it's not all multiple choice. The first section of questions you'll get at the beginning of the exam are anything but multiple choice. They might be fill in the blank. They might be a matching. You might have to put things in order from smallest to largest or slowest to fastest or vice versa. You have to pay special attention. It might be a drag and drop. They might give you a diagram. You have to drag and drop. They might give you a prompt on a screen. They might put you with a command prompt and say, perform a particular function. So you have to be ready for anything on this exam. I usually recommend skipping over the performance-based questions, going to multiple choice, going through all of the multiple choice, and then circling back. I find the multiple choice questions tend to help jog my memory of things I may have forgotten, and it helps me when I start going through any of those. So you never know what you're going to get as the performance-based questions. The one I have for you today, because I like to start off the first question of the study group with a performance-based question, and the question is more of a fill in the blank. I guess ideally this would be something that would be matching, but I don't have a way to match on this. So this is one where you'll have to fill in A, B, C, D, and E. I've got 5 interfaces on the screen. Those of you listening on the podcast, obviously you won't be able to participate in this one. This is a visual daily double, but this is a name the interfaces. And I have an image here with 5 separate interfaces that you need to know for your A+ exam, specifically the 229.01. So those are the 5 interfaces. What you want to do to answer this is to go to professormesser.com/QA and do a fill in the blank on that page. Do not answer the question in the chat room. We're going to pretend that we are sitting down and taking the exam for the very first time. We're not going to be able to Google this. We're not going to be able to ask our neighbors. We need to automatically put in. Some of you are already putting in the answers to these. A lot of you are getting these spot on. I'm looking for a very specific name of that last interface. And it has a lot of different names, but there's one very specific name that we would use to choose that particular interface. So make sure you take special care of number or letter E. What is letter E? What is the technical name of that interface? Some of you are getting it right. Some of you are, because we call that interface so many different things. It really could be anything. I'd give you partial credit on that. If you didn't come up with the exact one of naming that interface, it becomes a little challenging to figure out those pieces. Whenever we start going through these performance-based questions on the exam, I mentioned jumping ahead of them. On your exam, you can jump to any question at any time. The exam is not one that changes based on your answers. So if you wanted to jump to the very last question of the exam and take that one first, you could. You could take the entire exam backwards if you wanted to. So that's the real challenge, is making sure that that's something you can use with this. Hopefully you're able to recognize these particular interfaces and understand what those are. Maybe that would be one you should also know. Let's now, since a number of you have answered this, we've got more than half of you have already put answers in for this. And as I scroll through the answers, you can see a number of you are, in fact, I could probably show some of these coming through. So some of you have said the first one is FireWire. Some of you have said it's USB. Some of you have said HDMI. DVI is the third one. VGA is the fourth. But are these really? So let's go through each one of these and see if we know what these interfaces happen to be. So this first one, that does look very familiar to me. And in fact, I think most of you did recognize that as a USB interface. You can even see the 4 connectors there. So it must be USB 2.0 and lower for that one. It's not a 3.0 interface, is it? So it doesn't have enough interface ports on there. It's not quite FireWire. It sort of looks almost like it could be, but FireWire is a different interface on the inside of that image. You'll also notice if you have this on your third-party view, you can pop open the image, you can make it bigger, so maybe that would help out as well. But I can understand if you kind of went either way with that one. Really, it's a relative term to be able to see how big that one is. The second one, though, I think pretty much everyone got correct. That's an HDMI interface. We all are familiar with that one. If we're plugging in our newer monitors or newer televisions, we're generally using HDMI these days, and thankfully so. It's no longer the difficult RCA connectors and colored connectors we all have to plug in to get our component and composite connectors plugged in. We never know exactly what we're going to get with those. So HDMI is very easy. If it is a video-only signal, it's probably this third one, which is a DVI, the digital video interface. Digital visual interface, isn't it? Maybe I got that one backwards with the HDMI and the DVD. I always get my visual and video mixed up with those those three different things. So DVI is our third interface. We've got a fourth interface here, 15-pin connector. This one's sort of upside down looking, but it is still a VGA, whether it's right side up or upside down. Is there a right side up or upside down with VGA? There is a way you have to plug it in or it doesn't go, but it could really show up on your device either way. This one shows the smaller number of pins on the top, still a VGA connector. And the last one, we got a lot of different names for this one. Auxiliary, speaker. What I was really looking for is the tip ring sleeve, or the TRS, which is really what this one is. Is that tip ring sleeve? It is. So this would not be one with a microphone in it. It's probably a tip ring sleeve for stereo connection for audio. It's usually analog audio, and it's one where you'll see a lot of different names for this one as well. One of the things I look at when I look at these questions dealing with pictures, on your exam, you'll probably get this to be a drag and drop. So if I wanted to make this a little bit easier, I would have put the name of these to the right, and you would have been able to fill in the blank with the available names that are there. I made this one a little bit harder. So you would have had to know in the back of your mind what the names of these interfaces are. And I think most of you did a pretty good job with this one to be able to make that one work. All of these are interfaces that are listed in the CompTIA exam objectives for your 22901. Make sure that you know what each one of these looks like. You could certainly get a question just like this on your exam. Let's shift gears now away from these performance-based questions. Now let's go to one of the traditional multiple choice questions, and let's see how we do with this one. Here's our second new question of the day. This question asks, one of the server administrators at your company has submitted a help desk ticket that requires assistance with LILO, L-I-L-O. Which of these would be related to this issue? Would it be A, memory capacity, B, security patching, C is scheduling and automation, D is firewall rules, and E is boot process. So we've now gotten a help desk ticket. This is one you can certainly expect to get in your list of available tickets on the help desk where somebody needs assistance with LILO. Is it A, memory capacity, B, security patching, C, scheduling and automation, D is firewall rules, and E is boot process? If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. No answering in the chat room. That's a good way to get yourself silenced. You will get shadow banned. You'll think you're answering, but then nobody can see it anymore. I don't want to do that to anybody. So maybe you can absolutely go through the process of going to ProfessorMesser.com/QA, and we can all figure this out individually. And then I'll, of course, give you the answer when we get to the end of this one. This one may be an issue you've run into before. I'm going to take a sneak peek, as a matter of fact, and see how we're doing. We're answering this one pretty quick. I think a number of you have worked with this in the past. Let's see how we did with this question. We can go back to our list on Socrative. You can see well over half of you have answered this one, and we're sort of torn over this one. If we go with the largest number of answers, we'll go to E, boot process. 47 to 48% of you have said boot process. 20% of you said firewall rules. 15% of you have said scheduling automation, and 15% of you have also said security patching. And only 3% of you have said memory capacity. So now we're at this point where we did not get a majority with this one. So this is one, well, we just hit 50% on e-boot process. I think a number of you are piling on now to what you're going with, whatever the most number of people have answered. But half of us did choose e-boot process. I guess the first thing we need to know then is, what is LILO? You will run into this issue if you are running into things like a Linux machine, especially the boot process of a Linux machine. That first boot loader may be using a number of different techniques to load the Linux operating system. You may see one of the older type of systems like GRUB, that is the GNU Grand Unified Bootloader, or GRUB for GRUB. That's a very common Linux bootloader. You'll still see it used on a lot of different systems that are out there. A lot of the newer systems will use the GRUB. What you'll see on some of the older ones is LILO, the Linux loader. That's where the LILO comes from. That one not quite as ubiquitous as GRUB. GRUB is so easy to configure. It's got a lot of functionality and a lot of flexibility. It been supported quite a bit through the years. But if you've got a missing bootloader and you're trying to get Linux loading, then you might be missing grub or you might be missing Lilo. So this is a good place where, especially with Linux, you could use some type of boot repair live CD to help you reinstall that bootloader, especially if you've tried to install a separate operating system into a different partition. It may have overwritten your bootloader. So you may have to recover that bootloader or reinstall that bootloader to gain access again to that Linux operating system. So this is one where this would be useful to be able to make that happen. And I think that if you're someone who is learning the A+, you of course know that you have to know quite a bit with Linux and with Mac OS to get through this exam. And this is a very good example of something you should know. So for those 53% of you that answered boot process, got that one absolutely right. That is where you would see Lilo. That's where you might see grub. So if those do pop up on your exam, you'll know exactly what they are referring to. The 17% of you said firewall rules. Firewall rules do not use Lilo. There's nothing associated with Lilo, as those are used in a firewall rule. Scheduling and automation doesn't use Lilo. Security patching doesn't use Lilo. And memory capacity has nothing to do with Lilo. Lilo is all about starting the right operating system from that bootloader when you first turn on your machine. For those of you that are in the chat room, some folks did ask, is the 901, 902 different in the United Kingdom versus the United States of America? The 901 and 902 exam objectives are the same worldwide. So if you're taking the 901 exam, you're studying exactly the same topics that everyone else around the world is studying when they're taking their 901. If you're studying the 902, it's the same topics that everyone else around the world is studying when they are taking their 902 exam. So now if 50% of us knew that pretty cold, but 50% of us just now understanding what Lilo and grub might be. Now, if you see that on your exam, you'll know exactly what to answer. Let's do another question. I've got one here. Since we were talking about firewalls just a moment ago, let's talk about firewalls now. A security administrator has blocked TCP 445 at the corporate firewall to the internet. Which of these would be impacted by this configuration? Would it be A, querying statistics from a router? Would it be B, transferring files from a Windows file share? Would it be C, automatic IP addressing? Would it be D, translation between a fully qualified domain name and an IP address? Or would it be E, encrypted terminal communication? So there's our 5 different options. The security administrator has blocked TCP 445 at the corporate firewall to the internet. Which of these would be impacted by this configuration? Would it be A, querying statistics from a router, B, transferring files from a Windows file share, C is automatic IP addressing, D is translation between a fully qualified domain name and an IP address, and E is encrypted terminal communication? If you think you know the answer, do not answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer there. Yes, the study group is still applicable towards a CEU. Now, I give you a CEU a certification, if you will. I email you with a digitally signed email that says you must have watched this because I'm giving you a special code word sometime during this first hour. CompTIA doesn't require that, but I think it's nice if I know that you have sent this to me, you followed the correct process, you must have watched this, you have the right code word of the month. And sending back that digital signature on the email means you couldn't have changed anything in that email. Just another good way to make sure your CEU is actually worth something should someone ask you, because CompTIA can, of course, audit any of your CEUs. That's something that may be going on. So here we have a bit of a challenge. We've got a corporate firewall. We have apparently a port number that's being blocked. What would this affect? This is one where you'll notice I didn't ask you for what protocol would be blocked by this. CompTIA usually expects you to take it another step further. They're not really looking to see if you happen to memorize protocols and port numbers. They want to see if you really do know how these all work together. And so this question certainly speaks to that as we're trying to understand the details. Let's see how we did with this particular question. If we click the how do we do here. So the TCP 445, 52% of you have said transferring files from a Windows file share. 19% of you said encrypted terminal communications. 13% of you said a translation between a fully qualified domain name and an IP address, and then single digits for querying statistics from a router and automatic IP addressing. Now, this is another situation where whenever I'm writing these questions, I'm trying to get 50% of you to get this question right. And I'm really trying to get 50% of you to get this question wrong. So far, I'm doing a pretty good job, because I think if I give you a question that you are not expecting or a topic that you haven't seen before, that you're actually learning something in these study groups. So if you're missing these, if you find that I didn't get it right again, that's great. That's exactly what I'm hoping for you. You may think that's a bad thing. That's a great thing. I want you to get these questions wrong, because that's the only time you're ever going to be able to learn anything as you go through these topics. Most of us, though, 55%, the majority said transferring files from a Windows file share. Why would TCP 445 do something like that? Well, that's because TCP 445 is the SMB protocol, the server message block. This is the primary protocol used by Windows to be able to transfer files, to process print queue jobs, to send information between devices. It's very common to see this run over UDP ports whenever you're using NetBIOS over TCP. Newer versions of Windows, though, communicate directly to each other using TCP/IP without any NetBIOS, and those will use TCP 445. That's probably, these days, the more common SMB that you will see whenever you're working with these. TCP 445, pretty important. If you block that, Windows won't be able to share a file. You won't be able to send files into a share. You won't be able to see files that are in a share. You won't be able to print to a network printer. There's a lot of things that will break if you filter out SMB. And this is a very good example of what you run into. So those of you that said transferring files from a Windows file share, the 55% of you got that one absolutely right. It was answer B, transferring files from a Windows file share. Querying statistics from a router would probably be SNMP. So you're probably talking about a completely different set of ports when you're dealing with SNMP. Same thing for automatic IP addressing, which is DHCP. You've got translation between fully qualified domain name and IP address would be DNS. And you've got encrypted terminal communication, which would probably be an SSH session. That's probably going to be a different port down in the 20s. So you're dealing with port 22. Whenever you're dealing with encrypted terminal communication, you're going to be using that a lot over Telnet. That's one wherever you start dealing with different port numbers, you need to know those port numbers cold to be able to understand what they mean when you look at them on the network, especially when you get in Network Plus and especially when you get in Security Plus. But you have the first set of them whenever you start getting into the A+. You're expected to know these because you have built-in firewalls in your operating systems, and those firewalls can also use port numbers to be able to filter out different kinds of traffic. So that's a very good example of 56% of you getting that one absolutely right. The TCP 445 would be for server message block. That would be transferring files from a Windows file share. Well done. There are tons of port numbers, plenty of information about networking, security, port numbers, and tons of other things on the exam. A lot of you have making your own notes, and you should, as you go through all of my videos, make notes as you go along, like any other time that you need to study. A lot of you don't have the time to either write down all of these notes, or perhaps you would prefer having notes that include things like the graphics and the diagrams and the images from my videos. You will find those in the Professor Messer A+ course notes. And this is covered course notes for all of the 229.01 and course notes for all of the 229.02. This doesn't replace the videos. It doesn't replace a good book. It doesn't replace you making your own notes. It doesn't replace good Q&A or any hands-on, but it's nice to have those very detailed, important things to know in your mind before you walk into the exam. If you're looking for that Cliff Notes of put everything in one single place, it's just completely summarized. That's what I'm trying to do with all of these course notes that I have for A+, for Network Plus, for Security Plus, for Cisco's ICND1. I've got these course notes really do come in handy. And it's another way to help support the site. All of my videos, of course, are absolutely free to watch. I don't require any registration. There's no paywall. There's no videos that are hidden behind an extra section. If you pay extra money, everything is open and absolutely free. But of course, I do have to keep everything up and running, and your support of these course notes does exactly that. I have course notes that are available in a digital form. There's also a physical form, and I'll have them on my desk right now. I usually will show you the physical form of those, but I have the physical version of these as well. So you can purchase a PDF that you can download immediately, And that's one great way to do this, is to absolutely go through the process of trying to figure out, where do I go to get these course notes? How do I find them? They're all right here at ProfessorMesser.com/A+CN. A great way to support the site, a great way for you to get something that can really help you as you're going into those final stages of studying for your A+ exams. And thank you, of course, for everybody who's already purchased this. A number of people on the chat are saying, yes, I got the notes. They really helped. Thank you so much for your support. It really does go a long way. I've got more questions for you today. Here's another question that's available. This one dealing with the Windows search function, which I use all the time. This question asks that a user would like to use the Windows search to include system directories, which I, of course, always want to be able to do. Which of these would enable this functionality? How can you have Windows search include system directories? Well, you've got a number of options. A is use Control Panel and folder options. B is you use program files and search. C is you use Control Panel and search. Answer D is Control Panel and programs and features. And then E is administrative tools and search. There's a lot of different options you would use here. I've tried to list here the steps you would go through to find where you can enable or include system directories in your search. So would it be A, Control Panel, folder options? Would it be B, program files, search? Would it be C, Control Panel, search? Would it be D, Control Panel, programs and features? Or would it be E, administrative tools, search? So maybe that will help parse it out for those of you listening on the podcast. Those are your 5 options. Maybe you've done this before. I do this all the time because I'm always looking for some weird device driver sys file. And the Windows search by default doesn't allow any indexing of those system directories. You have to turn that on separately. It allows you to turn on very easily, but you have to enable it so that you can then search for those things whenever you're performing a search. It may not be something you do on all of your user systems, but it may be very helpful if you're on a server or if you're on a workstation that's your own. Help you find some of those things you've really been looking for. Becomes really handy to have those there. Maybe you've even done this before. As I mentioned, I do this all the time. If you think you know the answer, go to ProfessorMesser.com/QA. You can answer this one. This is another one I think that you really needed to have done before. And this is something I always emphasize whenever you're studying for your exam. People ask, can I just watch your videos and I'm done? Is that good? I create the videos to include all of the exam topics, but I think what you should really do to maximize the amount of studying you're doing, give you the best chance for passing this exam, is you need a good book, you need some good videos, you need some Q&A, and you need some hands-on. Get as much hands-on as you can. And if you've done this before, you probably remember going through the process. So this is one where hands-on can really help you answer a question like this one. I think it can anyway, especially since I've done this before and it sticks in your head. You have that muscle memory. That synapse is now firing whenever you see this question come up. Let's see how we did with this one. How did we do? Well, we can see 41% of us said Control Panel, folder options. We have 22% of you that said administrative tools and search. A tie for third, 14% have said Control Panel and search. 13% of you said Control Panel, programs and features. And then 9% of you said program files and search. So although we did get a majority, if we went with the largest percentage here, that would be A, 43% of you said Control Panel and folder options. And if you are guessing on that one, I would say that's a pretty good guess because that's exactly where that particular option is. It's in the folder options. This is one that gives you a lot of different capabilities, not just what you can index, but how you can browse the different folders, whether you open each folder in the same window or whether you open it in a new window. You've got the items that you can click, a single click to open an item, or you can do double click to open an item, depending on how you'd like that to work. The navigation pane, there is a search tab, though, that's in that folder options. If you go past the general, there's a view tab. So you can change how you view hidden files and how some of those files are used. But the one you want to go to is the search option that allows you to enable or disable certain functions. The first checkbox at the top, Don't use the index when searching in file folders for system files. The searches might take longer. You can include or exclude system directories, include or exclude compressed files, and then always search for file names and contents, although that might take a little bit longer when you do that. But of course, I turn on all of those things. I want it to take longer. I'm looking for a particular word that's in a particular presentation, that's in a particular folder, that might be in a system area. I don't know. I don't know where I put these things. I need Windows to look everywhere. So these folder options are exactly where they would be in your control panel. And so if you did answer A, control panel folder options, that's exactly where those things are. It comes in handy to find that. If you are someone who wants more information on this, you'll notice I put the name of the certification and the video right at the bottom of that explanation slide. This is 229.01. This is section 1.5, the Windows control panel. So that's why I say it's the control panel under folder options. If you answered A, control panel folder options, those 44% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. We've got plenty of other questions coming. We've got, we're in the second half of our study group, but we've got plenty more. If you just joined us, you can always watch along with the chat at professormesser.com/live. And of course, our live Q&A, if you're here live, let's say live a few more times, you can find at professormesser.com/QA, which stands for, I don't remember. But here's our next question. A laptop has been connected to an LCD panel for a presentation. What would be the best way to redirect the laptop screen to the LCD panel? This does come in handy to know this particular thing. You do this all the time. You walk into a conference room, there's an LCD screen, you plug in your laptop, nothing shows up. There must be some way to redirect it. How do you do it? The different options are A, reboot while connected to the LCD panel. Would it be B, configure an external monitor in the BIOS? Would it be C, power on the LCD panel after connecting the laptop? Would it be D, use the display function key? Or would it be E, install display drivers for the LCD panel? I used to do this a lot. I would travel from place to place to place. I would have my laptop. I would need to do a presentation. I would stop into 3 or 4 different companies every day, and you never knew what you were plugging into. So it becomes very useful if you're able to know exactly how to get that video on your laptop sent to the right screen so that you can show other people. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer that as well. Comes handy to be able to do that whenever you're working through all of those pieces. So make sure that you go through the process of thinking through this one. There's different ways to do this. This question is very specific in what it's asking. The question is, a laptop has been connected to an LCD panel for presentation. What would be the best way to redirect the laptop screen to the LCD panel? And I mention this because there's multiple answers you could choose here that could technically be correct. But the question is very specific. It's asking for the best way to redirect the laptop screen to the LCD panel. Make sure you do that. It becomes very important for you to be able to do that. I think that's one wherever I start looking through, how do I do that? That's a good way to do that. We're going to go through another 20 minutes of Q&A, and then we've got another hour of just an open phone lines you can call in. Of course, if you're someone who does need to check in or leave, you can always come back. There's a replay available immediately afterwards on the same links that you get, professormesser.com/live, or you go to the category on the Professor Messer website, and you can go back through years of study groups that we've done, and you can follow along with all of the replays. So some of you are asking, is there another one of these next week? Well, there's a Network Plus is next week, Security Plus is the week after that. But if you want another A+ study group, you can simply go to the ones we did last month or the month before or last year or a couple years ago or 3 years ago. We've been doing these for years. You can always go back to find out. Let's see how we did with this question, redirecting this LCD panel. Let's see how we did. And 87% of you said use the display function key. I think some of you have done this before. Every single other option available in this answer, all single digits. The highest one, 5%, said power on the LCD panel after connecting the laptop, which, by the way, would work. 3% of you said reboot while connected to the LCD panel. That usually also works as well. but those require you to turn a machine off or turn a machine on. You don't always have that flexibility. You don't have that time. There's a much faster and a much better way to do that. And one of the best ways to do it is simply use the function key. This is absolutely one of those things you need to know for your exam. It's part of the exam objectives. This comes specifically from the 22901 section 3.3 laptop features. And using those toggle keys for function might allow you to switch between just your computer LCD. Maybe it duplicates what you have on your screen to the LCD screen that you're connected to. You can also extend the functionality, which is sometimes useful if you're running a PowerPoint presentation or Keynote, so that you can show your Keynote notes on your screen, but the slides on the LCD. Comes really handy. You have something you can talk to that's right in front of you. And then projector only. Turn off your front screen. Everybody look at the projector screen. That's one where you have to not only know which function keys to press, it's also helpful if you're in the front of the entire room. I don't like it when I'm doing a presentation and I'm in the back of the room talking to the slide that's in front of me. Everybody's facing away from me. I can't see if they get what I'm saying. I don't know exactly what people's faces are doing. It's useful if I'm in the front. So there's my little presentation tip of the day to be able to do that. Those function keys become very handy, and in seconds, you're already redirecting the image. You don't have to reboot anything. You don't have to turn anything off. You don't have to find a remote control. You don't have to do anything. Just use that function key. That's why D used the display function key. The 87% of you got that one absolutely right. That's exactly what you should do. If you're running a Mac, there's probably the Mac hardware may not have the display function key. Some of them do. This laptop screen that I have in front of me now doesn't have those function keys across the top anymore. It's all software. You can't see it on my screen here. This doesn't have actual buttons on these Macs anymore. It is this. They change. The buttons will change on the LCD that's in front of it depending on the application that you're using. So there is software options on Mac OS in the details of the settings that you can use. So if anybody wants to see that one later, we can certainly step through understanding how to work through those. You guys did great on this one. D is the right answer. Use the display function key to make that work. That's a great way to do it. So well done if you've work through all of the details of working that LCD panel. If you don't know that tip, it can be very frustrating at getting that video redirected and working the right way again. So another good one to make that happen. Let's do another question. I've got one here. This question, let me flip the switch on my side so it shows up in your Socrative front end. And the question is that an organization has contracted with a third party to provide server hardware and storage at a remote location. Which of the following would best describe this contract? Would it be A, SaaS, whatever that is? Would it be B, hybrid development, or excuse me, hybrid deployment? Would it be C, PaaS? Would it be D, community development, community deployment? What's wrong with me? And then E is IaaS. All of these weird names and descriptions. Let's go through this again, shall we? See if I can get it right. An organization is contracted with a third party to provide server hardware and storage at a remote location. Which of the following would best describe this contract? Would it be SaaS, intentionally saying it wrong, hybrid deployment? Would it be PaaS? Would it be community deployment? Or would it be IaaS? So one of those will be the correct answer. This one really does have a single answer that it could possibly be. If you think you know that single answer, you can go to professormesser.com/QA. A lot of people have said these kinds of questions dealing with these types of deployments are, they're having them show up in the 22901 exam. This is specifically for the 22902. That's where these particular exam objectives are. So you need to be prepared regardless of what you're faced with on the exam. You never know exactly. And I'm not really sure if they present it to you on the 901 exam, if it's a question that would count to be able to do that. So you need to be ready regardless when those things happen. So that's a real challenge when that type of thing happens. So make sure you know what you're going to run into. So you've got a third party, you've contracted with them. They're going to give you a bunch of hardware and storage. So what could that possibly be? Let's see what you say it could possibly be. We can see that 45% of you have said IaaS. We see that 21% of you, really a tie for second between A, SaaS, and C, PaaS, the PaaS. And then 11% of you said a hybrid deployment, and 3% of you said a community deployment. Hardly anybody chose community deployment with those. So the real question is, you're really just getting storage. You're really just getting hardware. That's it from this third party. You're not getting an application. There's nothing to mention in here of any type of support. You're not getting any type of application development framework. You're getting almost nothing but hardware, and you're getting storage. That's pretty good, though. My implementation of what I do with ProfessorMesser.com, very similar to this. It's mostly storage, and it's mostly server hardware. There's also operating systems that happen to come with this as well. But I think for my use, for ProfessorMesser.com, I'm using IaaS, which is Infrastructure as a Service. I have a third party. I said I'd like to have this cloud-based server. Actually, I have multiple cloud-based servers, many cloud-based servers. Some of them are running web services. Some are database services. Some are load balancing. Some are reverse proxies. Some are caching. There's all kinds of servers I have running out there, all in the cloud. And this infrastructure as a service is how I am using most of those devices, because I'm just needing some hardware. I will put the Linux operating system on it. I will manage the device. I will install my own software. I actually take this a little bit further, and the third party I contract with also provides me with support. So they are very Linux knowledgeable. They understand these applications that I use. If I run into a problem, I can call them and say, oh, I need to set up this reverse proxy to do this thing with this stuff. There's lots of configuration files with this. I don't have time to research everything I need to do. Can you just do that? And they go, oh yeah, I know how to do that. All right, it's done. They're genius. So that's why I use Rackspace for everything. They're fantastic. So that's not a commercial. That's just, they're amazing the way they use those functions and know how to do everything off the top of their head. I rely on them for so much, because what I have purchased from them is this infrastructure as a service, where I put my data on their hardware, and everything works oh so well when I do that. So infrastructure as a service is the right answer for this one. The 48% of you that chose IaaS for option E got that one absolutely right. Software as a service would be one where I'm not buying hardware, not buying storage, I'm buying an app. So if you're using Google Mail, you're not really buying storage on Google Mail. Of course, you can buy additional storage on Google Mail, but Google Mail is more of an app. I'm really buying access to that app, or I'm using that app for free. I don't have to worry about what hardware it's running on. I don't have to worry about storage, where that storage happens to be. I don't have to watch how much storage is being used on that, generally speaking. I just log into the app and it's there, software as a service. The platform as a service, a little bit different. You see this with places like Salesforce.com, which have got these building blocks of applications. And if you're building your own app, they've already built the code. You simply put the blocks together and you have a new application that you can build to make that happen. Hybrid deployment and community deployment are when you might combine these types of cloud-based systems and deploy them in different ways. And it does not apply to just an individual accessing server hardware or an individual accessing storage. This would be where you would have different accesses from different places, like a community where you have a big grouping of services and then you have multiple people gaining access to those. So it would not be those either. So the correct answer for this one, IaaS, server hardware and storage. Things like Google Drive is more of a software as a service. They provide you software, it synchronizes your files. You're not really purchasing hardware. You can of course pay extra for more storage space on Google Drive, but you're not really buying dedicated storage just for you. You're just implementing a larger grouping of storage that would be available for that software. So I would categorize Google Drive as software as a service for those different pieces. Comes in handy to have those available as well. Software as a service as well for Google Office Suite. You're not really doing any programming or development work to put Google Sheets and all of the Google word processing and the Google presentation information. That is all software as a service, just ready to go. I just log in and I can use Google Sheets all ready and updated and ready for anything I need to be able to do. So in this case, E, infrastructure as a service would be the right answer with 49%. Well done. There is, by the way, if you are watching this for continuing education unit credit, what you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link right there that's available. And that Contact Us link allows you to put in your name, your email address. You can put in information about other things as well. And in that additional area to put other things, I want you to put that this is the September A+ study group. And somewhere in that message, because I'm reading these messages that are sent to me, somewhere in that message, make sure you put IaaS or Infrastructure as a Service. I'll accept either one of those or both if you want to put those in. That way I know you at least watched up to this point, and I can give you credit for watching this study group. So you have to follow that process. If you don't follow that process, you don't get credit. The process is part of earning the CEU. What we want to do is now go through and perform another question. I've got another one here, I believe. Let me check on my screen and make sure this service is available. Before we do that, there's quite a bit that we want to go through and study. Whenever we start looking at all of these different things we need to know, we do run into these scenarios where there's a lot of content. And you've seen on the 901, the 902, tons of information. And I mentioned earlier, it's great if you have a good book, you've got some videos to watch, you've got some hands-on that you can do, and then you've got some good Q&A. And what I've tried to do is put together some good Q&A for you with the Professor Messer Pop Quiz Collection PDFs. Total between both of these for the 901 and 902, over 1,300 questions. I have multiple choice questions. I have performance-based questions. There are study tips in here, and it's available as a digital PDF. You can download this and use it immediately. You can find these at professormesser.com/PQC for Pop Quiz Collection. I think I have my Pop Quiz Collection here. Maybe I can go to view some of this so you can see how it looks. I've got some questions up already. The way I've set up this Pop Quiz Collection is so that you can use it and go through these questions without knowing what the next answer is going to be. So for example, here's the first page. You can download a sample of this yourself from that page. For instance, which of these connection types would you most commonly associate with NAS? And then you've got A, B, C, D, and E. Then you got the next question here and then the third one there. When you jump to the answer, it takes you to a page that shows you that it's A Ethernet, explains to you why it's A Ethernet, gives you a link to the video that describes where this question came from, but then doesn't give you the next answer. Notice it hides it from you. So you have to go to the next question, which takes you to 1-2. If you had 4 identical drives, which are these RAID types, and it gives you the different RAID values. You jump to the answer, you're just seeing the answer for that question. So you aren't spoiled by seeing the next answer that's coming down the line. I hate that when I'm reading a book and and the next one's C. Now I already know that the next one is going to be C. But by using this PDF, you can jump back and forth and you never see the next answer on here. You can find out more about this and download it and try it yourself with your PDF reader at professormesser.com/PQC Pop Quiz Collection. Something you can choose yourself to be able to get the answers you might need to help study for your 901 and your 902 exams. Let's get through another question on our study group. We're getting short of time here, so let's get through as much as we can. The next question is about printers, and I know you guys love printers, so let's do a printer question. A user has reported that a laser printer is showing the message out of memory on the front panel of the printer. Which of these would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be A, restart the printer and resend the print job? Would it be B, restart the spooler services? Would it be C, print at a smaller resolution? Would it be D, upgrade the RAM in the user's computer? Or would it be E, restart the user's computer? It's got to be one of those. A user has reported that a laser printer is showing the message out of memory on the front panel of the printer. Which of these would be the best way to resolve this issue? Would it be A, restart the printer and resend the print job? Would it be B, restart the spooler services? Would it be C, print at a smaller resolution? Would it be D, upgrade the RAM in the user's computer? Or would it be E, restart the user's computer? Notice I'm not even asking for a lot of detail here. I'm asking really for the best way. I really think there's only one of these that really is the best way, even though I ask you for the best way. So that's my hint for you, is out of memory. If you think you know the answer, is go to professormesser.com/QA. You can, of course, be able to make all of those things, make those answers happen at professormesser.com/QA. Maybe that would be the way to make that work. Printers are a challenge, and printers, of course, are on the 901 exam. There's tons of printer questions on the 901 exam. This is one where if you start to go through the 901, there's questions about laser printers, inkjet printers, impact printers, and then printers that don't even exist, virtual printers. Virtual printers probably some of the more used printing that we do these days, and a real challenge making the digital printers work properly. So let's see how we did with printing on here. I'm going to wait for a couple more folks to answer this one. I'm seeing more questions come in as you're trying to Google what out of memory means on the front of a printer. So let's see how we did. Let's get a list here and get a breakdown of how all of these things work. We can see 39% of you said restart the spooler services. That's the largest number of answers we had. 27% of you said restart the printer and resend the print job. And 24% of you said print at a smaller resolution. And in single digits, 9% of you said upgrade the RAM in the user's computer. And only 1% of you said restart the user's computer. So that's really where you should go to be able to figure out those details. I think whenever we start trying to figure out printer problems, we get wrapped around the axle pretty quickly. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge to figure out, how do I resolve these problems? You have to look very closely at the problem itself, and then you have to know, how do you resolve that particular issue? So let's look at this particular error message. It's probably going to be in the front of the printer. Like I said in the question, there's usually an LCD panel there, and it says, here's what you need to do. Here's an option, something that might help you. That becomes handy to make that happen. Whenever I start looking at the front panel, though, sometimes the things they're giving you on the front panel are not exactly what you would expect, but things like out of memory or low memory is one that should, of course, give you an idea of here's what you should be working with. Memory in a laser printer is a little different than memory that's working in any other way. This is where, whenever I start going through the details of trying to figure out memory problems, this is a very, very common memory problem for laser printers. Make sure that as you go through and figure out the details of how do I examine this laser printer problem or resolve it, look at the problem that's in front of you. And this one was out of memory. The way laser printers work, of course, is they don't even start printing until they have fully laid out the entire page in memory, and only then do they start printing. So they don't do half the page and then wait and do the other half of the page. Laser printers are an all-in-one scenario. So you have to be able to recognize and understand that it has to build that entire page. So if you're building a very complex page, it's very graphic intensive, it's high resolution, it has to put a lot of different information onto that page, you could run out of memory before the page is built inside of the printer. So restarting the printer, that's not going to help you. You're going to resend the same job to it. It's going to fill up the same memory. You're going to run into the same scenario. Restarting the spooler services isn't going to help you because you're not having a problem with the spooler. The images, the print job is getting to the printer. The printer is trying to build the image out. The spooler is working exactly as you would expect. The only way that you could resolve this problem is maybe put more memory into the printer. Probably not something that is immediately available because printers don't usually use the normal memory we would put in a computer. But what you could do is what the third most popular answer here, C, print at a smaller resolution. That means that your image is not going to be as complex. It's not going to require as much memory to build out the image inside of the printer. And you may be able to print that particular output using a smaller amount of memory and not hitting that memory limit on that particular printer. It's obviously not going to look as good when it comes out of the printer as something that would have been at a higher resolution, but you don't have enough memory in that printer to be able to print at a higher resolution. And that's where you run into problems with these particular issues on printers, especially laser printers, because you have to have enough memory to make all of these different functions work properly. Make sure that you do that and you're able to work through those details. All of this information that you've got in this study group comes directly from the exam objectives that CompTIA makes available for free. And you can find all of those at professormesser.com/objectives. Whenever I start looking at trying to figure out what do I need to know for the exam, you can download them all from CompTIA. They're all right there. So make sure that you go and download those. People ask me all the time, where do I really get an understanding of, am I ready to take the exam? Well, that's right there. They are all available right there. So make sure that you look through those exam objectives, tons of detail, and however you work through those to be able to have this work. And this should be the first thing you download, and it should be the last thing you download and look at before you walk into the exam. If you're trying to determine, do I know everything I need to know before walking in, this is going to tell you. Make sure you take advantage of those exam objectives. All of this information we go through every month. We do one of these study groups at the beginning of every month. Our next one's going to be on October the 3rd, 2018. You can, of course, go back and look at our entire archive that's on ProfessorMesser.com. You go through every single one of our study groups we've ever done. And of course, if you want to know when the next study group is going to be, maybe you're watching this replay well after October the 3rd of 2018, you can always go to ProfessorMesser.com/calendar and know exactly when the next live event is going to be. And that's because we've gone through another hour. Stick around. We've got another hour or so of Q&A. I'll open up the phone lines. I'll just take phone lines until you're tired of talking to me. We can, of course, get that daily pop quiz at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. I also appreciate everyone that is subscribed to YouTube. Of course, we will be having new A+ videos near the end of the year. You're going to want to absolutely go through and subscribe to YouTube at ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. Don't forget about the course notes at ProfessorMesser.com/A+CN. Also, check your pop quiz collection, ProfessorMesser.com/PQC. And of course, we do one of these every month. Check when the next one's going to be at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. Thanks for sticking around for this first hour. Thanks for participating in the Q&A. I could not do this without you. Stick around for the next hour. I have plenty of things that we could talk about as well. And of course, we'll be taking your phone calls where you can ask me anything. Whether I answer or not, that's a completely different question. But thanks for joining us this time. We will see you next time on the A+ Study Group. So in the chat room, people are already asking about the new version of the exam that should probably come out, I don't know, January? You're really talking about months from now. Will the new videos be okay to use if you're still studying 901, 902? Nope. You should study content that is specifically written for the version of the exam that you're going to take. So if you're taking the 901 exam, you should be studying materials that are for the 901. If you're studying for the 902 exam, you should be studying materials that are for the 902. You do not want to mix and match those. And when the new exam comes out, you'll need new study materials if you plan on taking that exam. So that's an important one as well. Let's get this phone lines up and running, and I'll tell you all about how you can call in on those phone lines as soon as I do this. This is the step in the process I have to go through on my side to make this happen. So bear with me a moment as I start the phone lines up and have all of those things happen. I have to click a few things on my side. I have to call into the show myself. There's all kinds of things I have to do on this end. So we're going to do that right now as I pot some things up, as we say, in the business with the potentiometer. And I need to click on my Skype, and I need to call into this myself. And I need to click a few buttons once I call into this myself. As soon as I can get this up and running on my side, then I'll tell you how you can call in for all of those pieces as well. So I need to type a thing in here on my side and hit a pound sign, and then it says I have to enter a thing, and then I type this in, and then finally it should say welcome. See, I love that when it happens. Welcome. That means that you could now call in if you wanted to. The phone line is 855-785-RJ45. You could, of course, if you were on Skype, an absolutely free call in anywhere in the world. You put a +1 at the beginning, +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in if you would like to, and we'll answer questions there. Or, of course, the chat room is right here. You can go to the chat room at ProfessorMesser.com/live, and I'll take questions from the chat rooms as well. So that becomes handy for having those things available. I'll be able to take many different questions in many different ways. So some of you said, should you take the 901 and 902 together, or should you leave some time in between? I highly recommend you take them completely separately, that you take and study for the 901 independently and without studying any 902 materials. So you study just the 901. You understand there's very little overlap between the exams. So this makes it very easy to do this way. So make sure that you go through and study just the 901 and then take the 901 test. Then you shift gears and study for the 902 and take the 902 test. So as I mentioned, the 901 and 902 exams are going to be around until next summer, the summer of 2019. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, the next summer. So that comes in handy. You got 9 months before that exam goes away. You got plenty of time. We don't know the exact release date. It's probably in January for the 1001 and the 1002 exams. Those will be the new versions, the 220 1001 and the 220 1002. That's a long time ago. Never, never, never wait to get certified. Do not wait on this new exam. Do not wait for new exam objectives to come out. There's not that big of a difference between these two exams. You're not missing anything by not waiting. That doesn't even make sense. And by the way, whether you pass the 901, 902, or you pass the 1001, 1002, you get exactly the same certification. There's no difference between those certifications. It's the same cert. So it's just a different set of questions that you would answer. So that's the real important part. Make sure that you take right now the exam. Study right now. Why would you wait to get certified? There is no advantage to waiting. There's every advantage to having the certification in your pocket. There's almost no exam on there. You will find that the 1001, really the 1002, as people are asking, not going to have as much Windows 10 content as you think. A lot of people don't realize that Windows 8, Windows 10, it's the same thing. It's the same operating system. But Windows 8 got fixed with Windows 8.1. And so really Windows 10 is Windows 8.1. That's really what it is. It's a newer, it's a tweak of Windows 8.1 that put a 10 on it. There's really not much difference between those, which means if you've studied for the 901, 902 exam, you sort of know everything Windows 10 is bringing to the table except for a few minor things. So that's really people don't realize this because Windows 8 got such a bad rep. There's just minor differences with Windows 10. Yeah, Windows 10 kind of Windows 8.2. The real difference with Windows 10 is Microsoft's approach to the operating system. And they've taken an approach that's very similar to Apple's approach with Mac OS, which is let's have one version. Let's have Windows 10. And Windows 10 will simply be an incremental updates to that single operating system. There's not going to be these dramatic updates to Windows 10 to have Windows 11, Windows 12. They're going to stop that nonsense. Instead, it's going to be Windows 10 with an update maybe every year that will update a number of features, that will change a little bit of the user interface, but it's not going to be this completely different operating system that's running. So this is where I think it's almost a little better. People who have used Mac OS for 10 years have been running OS 10 for 10 years. It's very different OS 10 today than it was 10 years ago. I guess it's about 10 years. But the OS 10 today, it's still OS 10. So that's the thing that I think Microsoft has figured out. Why can't we have incremental updates? It's better for us. It's better for our users. And we'll just make sure everybody updates as we go along. So make sure you know that. That's the real thing that's important to have those there. There's a number of different topics on the exam you need to know. And a lot of people are asking, how much detail do I need to know about a particular topic? So in the chat room, they're asking how much detail in the CPU sockets is important to memorize. Well, let's look at the exam objectives and we'll see if we can decipher this. This is not always the best way to do this, but we're going to look at the exam objectives anyway, and we're going to see if we can figure this out. So I'll take the 901 exam objectives and let's pull up the latest set. I think I have the prettier set here we can pull up, and we're going to look at it on my screen so we can see what's going on here. I'll show you as we go through this. One moment. Let's click over to my screen. There it is. There's the exam objectives for the 220-901. And I'm just going to skip ahead for a few pages. See if I can do that. There we go. So one of the things that they mention on here that are specific to the type of CPU sockets is in section 1.6, install various types of CPUs and apply the appropriate cooling methods. That's all they tell you. They don't tell you know the dates of when these sockets were introduced. They don't tell you understand what type of socket will be matched with what CPU. All they really say is install various types of CPUs, and then they give you a finite set of socket types. Because this exam is 3 years old, people tell me all the time, hey, you need to add the newer sockets to your videos. No, the newer sockets are not listed in the exam objectives. These are the only ones you really need to know. The real interesting part of this, I find, is that there's not a lot of detail here telling you really either way which way to go. And because they aren't specifically telling you a lot of detail about what you need to know with these sockets, I take that as I don't need to know a lot of detail about them. So don't worry so much about the intricate details of the architectures or dates between when these sockets came out. I provide you some of that information in my videos to add a little flavor so you can get at least some understanding of the differences between these. But I don't think in any way you need to understand the time frames associated with the releases, because nobody needs to know that. You need to know if the CPU is going to work in your computer. And when you plug it into your motherboard, how do you cool it? What's the best way to do that? And we do talk about that in the videos as well. So I think that's important too. Interestingly enough, this list of sockets doesn't exist in the 1001 exam. They got rid of it, threw it out, thankfully. I don't think it really adds anything, because most of us, when we're building a motherboard, we're building a system. Let's say you're building your own computer. You decide the motherboard you want to use, and usually there's a very specific CPU that works on that motherboard. So that's the one you would use. It's not like there's an LGA socket, so let's find any LGA CPU. It doesn't work that way. No, no, no. Motherboards and CPUs are very tightly knit. They're very tightly designed together. So you really don't have a lot of different options when you're trying to decide what motherboard and CPU. Let's just choose any CPU. Nope, will not work. Will not operate that way. So make sure that for at least your A+ exam, know the styles of these CPUs, know the differences between them, understand an Intel 775, is that a PGA or an LGA? You need to understand those different types. But that's about it. I think you'd be okay. If you knew that, I think you'd be all right. With that, let's go to the phone lines. We got a caller, the 786 area code. There you are, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, how's it going, Professor? Morning. My name's Hassan, and I'm calling from LA.
Hello, Hassan. What can we do for you?
The volume down. Okay, so I have been studying for the Security Plus exam for about 2 months, and I just find myself in a position where I'm a little pessimistic for in regards to taking the exam, because I have 3 days off and I study most of the time, but then the rest of the 4 days I go back to work. And after I come back from work, I just have to review everything.
Right.
And I am not ready for the exam. I know that you've mentioned that you have exam objectives and you have content on your website, but is there another trick to this? Because it's almost been 2 to 3 months that I've been preparing for this exam, and I still feel that I'm not ready. Just because, I get that break because of the work,
right?
And then when I come back, I feel like I'm not ready yet.
In a way, it's sort of a good thing that you're getting that approach to this particular issue, because now you've going through this set of exam objectives, you're studying these materials, and you're kind of finding what I find when I go through these certification exams is that there's a lot of content on here. A lot of people think the Security Plus exam, because it is in a way an entry-level exam into security, a lot of people look at that and consider that as being maybe easy. They think, well, that's going to be an easy one. It's an entry level into security. But as someone who has been in the security world, working as a systems engineer for security companies, there's a lot to security. And as you've seen with the exam objectives for security, which I'll put up on the screen, and I'll kind of flip through a number of these. My notes are in here, and you can see some of this is color-coded. But the depth of Security Plus is very different than the depth of Network Plus or A Plus. Whereas I think A Plus and Network Plus has a lot of technical minutia that you need to know. You need to know port numbers. You need to know feeds and speeds. You need to know sockets. And that you need to know interfaces on the A Plus exam. The Security Plus has a same level of knowledge, but it's not on these very specific technical details. It's more of a broader knowledge you need across a lot of different aspects of security. For example, you of course are familiar with this. Section 1 is network security, which does include tons of port numbers and other things. We've got compliance and operational security as Section 2. Section 3 is threats and vulnerabilities. Section 4 is application data and host security. Section 5 is access control and identity management. We're not done because Section 6 is cryptography. So this is a very, very broad exam. It's not one that should be undertaken lightly. And that's why probably more than other exams, I usually recommend two important things for the Security Plus. One, it's really helpful if you have a networking background or a foundation with networking that you can then apply to these, because you're going to be learning about firewalls and proxies and port numbers. And if you already understand how networks operate, that helps you already understand how these security technologies are layered on top of the network. And that's sort of a generic thing I tell anybody who wants to get into security. There's not a lot of entry-level jobs in security. There's a lot of entry-level jobs in networking, and security builds on that networking to a major degree. So I always tell people the more networking knowledge you have, the easier security is going to be for you. The other thing I tell people is get as much hands-on as possible. We've been talking about cryptography and digital signatures on the Reddit's. Reddit has a Discord for CompTIA. There's a CompTIA Discord for Reddit. So there's a couple hops there. So if you go to Reddit, to the r/CompTIA subreddit, they have a Discord that's in the sidebar. You can go there. And a lot of people there, we've been talking about digital signatures. Well, there's a whole aspect to digital signatures that deals with cryptography, but has nothing to do with encryption. And sometimes those types of things throw you. You really have to parse these things out. But if you're someone who's already been using the digital signatures, you've been digitally signing emails, you've been sending emails to other people using your private key and to encrypt it, and they've been able to decrypt it using your public key. Once you start using these things, it becomes very, very familiar to you. And probably more so on the Security Plus, the Network Plus, and A Plus. Get as much hands-on as you can with these Security Plus topics. It will really, really help you. If you can work with the firewall, if you can look at a log file, if you can understand the details of doing asymmetric encryption or creating digital signatures and sending it to your friends and having them verify the digital signature, that becomes really, really useful. And those questions will come up on the exam and you'll know them cold, and then you can keep going. The same thing applies with every other section of Security Plus. So I get where, and I have the same problem. You visit a topic, you go away for a while, you're not dealing with a topic anymore, you're in a completely different world, and then you come back and now you have to catch up again. I think that's just normal. But if you get a little more hands-on, I think some of those things get solidified in your brain a little better. Your muscle memory is able to ride the bicycle a little easier because you already rode it before. You know how this works. I think that might help you a little bit as well. So try to get your own system up and running, perform some packet captures, do some of this cryptography, understand these IPsec tunnels, get those things in your brain, and I think it's going to help you as you start to study other things. Did I lose you, Hassan? He's over it. He's tired of me talking already. He still shows there. Maybe you're muted. I still show you potted up. So, but that's where I like to tell people it's those four things. Get a good book, get the videos, get as much Q&A as you can. Q&A helps too with that. It kind of solidifies those topics in your brain. And of course, get as much hands-on as possible. Nope, we lost him. He was terminated. But that's where whenever I start looking at where do I go with these things, that's where I go to have all of those. He's called back in. Welcome back. Hopefully some of that makes some sense. Did it, Hassan? Nope, he's just not there at all. It's just not talking no more. Whatever method you got there, not communicating. But hopefully you can follow along with that video and give you some ideas of that's some of the things you can do. If you're ever trying to break through some of those barriers during your studies, those are the 4 places. And maybe 1 week is video, 1 week is book, 1 week is Q&A, 1 week is hands-on. Maybe that's the way you break them out and be able to work through those types of pieces. One of the things, and they're mentioning this in the chat room, is the questions you get on the exam are not going to be definition questions. They're not going to ask you, what is SNMP? Simple Network Management Protocol. You will never get a question like that. It will be more along the lines of what we saw today, where a port number was filtered on the firewall. What did that break? That's not SNMP. That's not the definition of what SNMP is. You have to know, well, if that port number, that's SMB. SMB is how Windows works, and here's the answer that deals with Windows breaking. Those are the types of questions you're going to get on the exam that layer themselves. It's never a direct, here's the question, here's the answer, there you go. That's where you're going to run into issues with all of those. And hopefully you can now get enough hands-on, enough experience with using these that you can figure out where they're leading you down that path and trying to make all of those things happen. Becomes area. So a question in the chat room, is there one hardware area that has a lot of presence on the exam, or is it evenly distributed? One of the nice things about these exam objectives is they tell you right at the beginning of the exam objectives exactly how much of this exam is covered by these domains. It is kind of a broad brush. I do understand that. So for instance, on your A+ exam, hardware, which is domain 1.0, is 34% of the exam. And if you look through section 1.0, that deals with, section 1 is huge. Deals with BIOS, motherboard components, RAM types, PC expansion cards, storage devices and media, CPUs and cooling methods. We're only halfway done. PC connection interfaces, power supplies, custom PC configurations, display devices, PC connector types and cables, peripheral devices, SOHO multifunction devices, various print technologies, and printer maintenance. So that entire 15 sections of the 901 exam is 34% of the exam. So that's where you get into a scenario like, which one of those do I study? Well, you study all of them. You never know exactly what it is they're going to ask of you, but also don't worry so much about the details. For example, section 3.0 mobile devices is 17% of the exam. If you're on your last day, your last week of study, let's say, and you've studied very little from section 1, you've studied very little from section 3, then what you should do is spend a lot of time studying from section 1, because that's almost twice, not even twice, 1.5 times the amount. It's 34%. That is almost twice. That is twice of the hardware section. So it's exactly. If we do the math, you'll find it's twice. So that's where you want to go with this, is make sure you cover and study for exactly what's going to be expected of you on the exam. You would expect 34% of the exam is going to be one of those hardware topics. So that's where you would figure out. Of those 15 sections in domain 1, you don't know which one you're going to get the most questions about. CompTIA doesn't tell you that. All you have is the 34%. That's all you can go with. So that's what I recommend, is very broad brush here. Know everything that's listed in the exam objectives. If you know all of it, then you're covered. That's the way to do it. I think that becomes useful. Let's talk about CEUs. Some of you that are getting CEU credit. Question in the chat room. If you have Network Plus certification and you participate in the A+ and Security Plus study groups, do those CEU credits work for renewing Network Plus? Well, according to CompTIA, the quick answer, by the way, is yes. And that's because the CompTIA CEU website, let's have a look at what we need to know about CEUs from CompTIA. They talk about getting the CEUs that you need, choosing a renewal path and figuring out all the things you need to do. There's CEUs, there's so many different ways that you can renew that a lot of these pages, you have to spend hours reading it. But renewing with multiple activities would be the way to collect these types of CEUs. And one of the things they have listed in here are things like training and hire. Maybe this is where it is. The training and hire, attend a live webinar. So I had to go through 5 clicks to get to that point, but we're here. And it says that at least 50% of the webinar content must relate to one or more of the exam objectives for the certification that you're renewing. So I think what we went through today, there was a lot of networking, there was a lot of other things for A+. With 50% of the webinar content must relate to one or more of the exam objectives for a certification you're renewing. That's a tough one for Network Plus or Security Plus. It works a lot better the other way. If you have an A+ and you watch Network Plus or Security Plus study group, we know that all of that content applies to one or more of the exam objectives. It's a little bit difficult going the other direction. You would have to make that determination based on the content we covered in that particular study group. And I think that would be the way to do it. I think it probably would. I think 50% of the content we went through today dealt with networking. Networking is on the Network Plus and the Security Plus. I think you're fine. So if I had to choose, say, yeah, I think 50% would cover it. I think that would work on the specific question you have. Always refer back to the CompTIA website. They will always provide you with the information that tells you exactly what you need to know for any one of those. I think that's ultimately there, and they change these things all the time. So make sure you go back and look at them and see if there's something else that they have changed with those. I mentioned a lot of people aren't collecting CEUs anymore. That's because if I go back to that main page of CEU, one of the options they have these days, if you're renewing your continuing education credits, is to renew with a single activity. Who would not want to do that? And one of the options they have is you can look at the different ways to renew, but the way they do it is the CertMaster CE right here. So they have this online system where you can purchase CertMaster CE for A+, Network Plus, or Security Plus. But for the A+, if you have earned an 800 series exam or earlier, so this doesn't work if you've got your 900 series already, but your 900 series isn't anywhere close to being 3 years up yet. Even if you took it the very first day, your 900 series still wouldn't expire until December, which at that point they would ostensibly have a newer version of this available. But by $129 US, you buy it, and then in 4 to 6 hours, you're renewed. That's it. Done. That was easy. That's really easy. And in fact, the $129 is about what you would pay for the continuing education unit purchase you have to do every year to have the maintenance costs. So it pretty much is the same as having CEU maintenance, except you don't collect any CEUs. You don't send any emails. You don't fill out any forms. You don't submit them to any websites. You don't go to any more webinars. You don't do any more online systems. You don't just take this thing. 6 hours later, at the worst case, 6 hours later, you're renewed. That's the one I'm doing. I would do that all day, every day. So you would get, in fact, if some people have gone down to the last days of their certification before they expire, and I said, well, have you just done this? They didn't even know it was there. Like, let me do that. And they came back hours later. I'm done. I'm renewed for 3 years. I got my certification. We're good. So it's a great way to do it. I think that's probably an outstanding way to do it. I think that's the lazy person's way of doing it. That's why I would do it. That's just, it's me all day, every day. I don't have a lot of time. I don't want to go through, submit CEUs. Now, if your job was one where normally in the things you do during the day with your job, you just naturally accumulate CEUs. Okay, I get that. Of course you would submit CEUs. You don't have to do anything else. You pay about the same amount. You submit the CEUs that you would normally fall over. You trip over these CEUs as you're walking down the hallway at work. Yeah, that makes sense. You would do it that way. So that's one, of course, that is good. And of course, you could take a higher level certification, take the Network Plus, and that will renew your A+. Take the Security Plus, and that renews your Network Plus and your A+. And you take these higher levels certification exams, but of course, you have to take and pass that exam. You can't just take the exam, you have to pass the exam. So that becomes a little more of a challenge too. Make sure you think about those and what you're doing with them and how those work, and that becomes a little more important with those. So make sure you go through that process. One of the things on the exam that's also pretty important is you're given at the beginning of an exam the candidate agreement, and they tell you you can't talk about anything you see on the exam. They don't mean just some things. They mean nothing. You can say nothing about what you saw on this exam. So make sure that you also think about when you come out of the exam that you can't say anything. That becomes a little more of a challenge too. I've seen some folks in the chat room saying, oh, I saw this on my exam. Ethically, you can't say that. You signed an agreement saying you wouldn't. So that's one of those things. I like Mr. T in the chat room gave a really good tip, and it's one I should probably have listened to before I took my last industry certification exam, which is don't second guess the answers you're giving. A lot of times that can work for you and against you. But if you're really confident, you think you know it, answer the question and go the next one. Part of my problem, and this is also an important adjunct to that particular tip, is I read things and I think I read it properly and I didn't read it properly. I missed the word not, which of course changes the answer completely. So if you're able to go through the entire exam, hopefully you've got enough time to go back to the beginning. CompTIA allows you to do this. Not everybody does. Cisco, for example, you can't do this. But CompTIA allows you to go all the way back to the beginning of the exam or hop to any question on the exam and look at the exam question again. So you can go all the way to the top of the exam and step through every question again, just read it again, look at your answer, read it again, look at your answer, which goes very quickly the second time through. Sometimes you'll catch those where it said, oh, wait, that said not. That's the only time where I would recommend you go back and you change the answer for what you're doing there. So make sure that you don't get into that scenario. Cisco, yes, Cisco does not allow that. The Cisco exams, when you answer a question, you are then moved to the next question. And we believe with the Cisco exams, they decide what next question you're going to get based on the answer you just gave. And you can't back up. So Cisco's a little bit different. Cisco's, you have to get that answer right then, and then you're moved to a completely new question. You can't back up. You can't go back to it. You can't check your work. That's it. So we're very spoiled. The CompTIA exams, we're really, really spoiled that we aren't in that scenario. So make sure that you take advantage of that, that you're able to go back through, have enough time left. You're able to go back through those questions. You're able to understand what they're asking of you. It becomes pretty handy to have that functionality. And they do have that flag option at the top. Now, if you haven't seen this, let me see if I can find the right keywords for you on the YouTube. Let me turn this down a bit so it doesn't blast out for everybody. In fact, I don't know if I'm going to be able to play the sounds on this. But under CompTIA exam experience, I think I typed it the wrong way. Taking a CompTIA exam. So if you go to the YouTube, CompTIA has a video that says taking a CompTIA exam. There it is. And they go through what the exam looks like. They show you the little flag for review option at the top and how that's used, which you can't see because my head's in the way, which is why you should go watch this video. This is on the CompTIA channel, and it's called Taking a CompTIA Exam. And they really go through what you can expect to see. Now, if you've never run into this scenario before, you've never taken a CompTIA exam before, this can really be helpful because now you know what to expect when you walk in. And what the part is, once you finish the exam and you end the exam, it takes you to a review screen. Let me back up. So if you flagged any questions, it will tell you if you didn't answer a question, if you flagged it, and you can simply click on that question and go back to the question and answer it or change it. So you've got different things you can do to be able to do that. So yeah, this is one where I overdo it with the flagging of questions. I flag tons of questions. My philosophy on flagging questions is if I knew 100% that I got that question right, I don't flag it. If I think I got it 99.9% right or less, I flag it. So when I'm done with the exam, I try to make sure I get through the exam very quickly. When I'm done with the exam, I got a lot of questions flagged. That may or may not be the best strategy for you. This is what I do. I'm not saying that's the best one. Clearly, That doesn't even sound right when I'm saying it, but that's the way I do it. That way I know I get to read back through and I can immediately skip any of the, I told you I go through every question at the end. That's not true. I go through every question I'm not 100% sure about. So I go through every question that I flagged, and if I'm 99.9% at that point, I take the flag off. And then I go down to a smaller group, and then I can spend a little more time. So I'm kind of whittling down. And at some point, you just don't know. You're just taking a stab. But make sure on the exam, you answer every question. Do not leave a question blank. Take a guess. You are not penalized for getting a question wrong, but you don't get any points for leaving it blank. So make sure you at least, anything you didn't know, just mark A. There's my strategy for you. Just put something down and you'll be in better shape. Back to the phones, the 224 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. Is it just me? Is everything muted today? Am I just not hearing things coming through on my call in? That's certainly possible. So I apologize, caller. That's the case. But I'm just not hearing anything coming through on that. You're potted up. I've got you there. Should be working. I should have played that video. I would have heard it.
Opportunity
See?
to review
No,
and make
my audio's working fine. So sorry about that, caller. For those pieces that are there. Pretty sure I'm still on my Skype side. Make sure. Am I? Oh, no, I'm not. Something happened there. So caller, you can call back in. I'm going to call back in and see if I can make this happen for you. That's the problem. It's not you, it's me. That's pretty obvious. Let me call back in real quick, everyone, and we'll make this happen. And it says, all right. I'll click these little things. I should have seen that on my screen. Did it work? Oh, I got to put the pound sign.
Welcome.
Oh, there we go. So you can try calling in again. I apologize. Hopefully that will work better if I'm actually called in too. It's like magic. So in the chat room, they're speculating that the most common correct answer is C. I don't know. I don't. Well, okay. Mark everything as C. What can you lose, right? Just go through the pieces. Back to the 224 area code. Hello, caller. Are you there? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how you doing? Ishmael. I'm calling from Illinois.
Hello, Ishmael. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you?
So I've been working as a computer tech for about 3.5 years now for a school district, and I'm finally planning to further my career, and I've been studying for the A+ now for a few weeks. And one of the problems I'm having is it's really difficult for me to like memorize the RAM section, and I wanted to know if there's a particular part of the RAM section I should know more than the others. It's when it comes to like the speeds and all that, it's really difficult for me to memorize all that. So just wanted to see if you have any advice when it comes to that.
I sort of do. One of the things that they mention on the exam is understanding DDR2 and DDR3 and DDR4. And a lot of the speed information I put into the exam videos into my training course, because back in the day, I go back to the 600 series A+, which was the first video course I created. So I did 600 series, 700, 800, 900. Now I've done this 5th series. But in that series, back in the day, they really wanted you to know about these speeds. And what I found is they've started to come off of the speeds question a bit. It doesn't seem like they're putting as huge an emphasis in knowing the intricacies of how these speeds are created. And you'll notice if you go back and look at my 600 and 700 series exam courses, which are still out on YouTube, those courses really go into the exact formula and how we understand those speeds are created. I don't do that in the new series. I just tell you, if you have this value, multiply it by 8, and you get this other value. If you give you the other reverse value, divide it by 8, and you get the other value. And I kind of skip over the intricacies of the rest of that, which a lot of people say you're skipping over a lot of the detail. And I do that intentionally because I feel that I have seen that CompTIA doesn't seem to be emphasizing those things as much as they used to. And so my recommendation to you, especially if you're getting wrapped around the axle with these speeds relating to memory, my recommendation is to not memorize it. My recommendation is to avoid it completely and spend whatever time is frustrating you on memory, spend it on anything else. Spend it on printers. That's where you should spend the time if you're trying to make a decision on those things. I think CompTIA is not emphasizing it as much as they used to. In the new versions of the certification exam, I'm not including it anymore because I just don't think they've found that it's important. I think its importance has decreased over time as well. A lot of the things we do with putting together these computer systems these days, we don't even think about a lot of these values. The motherboard has a specific memory type they'll take. It's important to know nuances of why a certain value is better than another, but we don't have to know how it's calculated. We just have to know why it's better than the other. So that's the reason I say don't worry about it so much. Probably not going to get any questions about it. And ultimately, I don't think CompTIA thinks it's that important anyway because they don't emphasize it in their exam objectives either.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for that answer. And that's a huge relief because I was definitely stuck on that section. So
well, they'll hit you with laser printer questions for sure. So go there if you have to spend any time.
Okay. Yeah.
Good luck.
All right.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And thank you for doing what you do.
Absolutely, sir. Take care. Best of luck. That's always the thing you need to watch out for in those exams anyway, is what are they going to ask you? And if you're wondering, I say the same thing. It's kind of odd for me to say to someone, oh, just don't even study that. What are you doing? Don't do that. I do the same thing on the Network Plus exam. A lot of people get stuck around the axle with subnetting. And they're trying to figure out, what do I do with subnetting? How I can't get it. I've spent a week on subnetting and I can't get it. My answer to them is forget it. Cross it out, go to the next thing. Don't spend a week on any single topic, because if you look at the exam objectives, that section, that domain might be 30% of the exam. It's one of 10 different sections. You might get one question about subnetting. You might get two. Some people, although they aren't supposed to talk about it, some people have told me I didn't get any questions on subnetting. They spent all that time studying subnetting. They got 0 questions on subnetting. So that's why I tell people sometimes you don't have to know that. Sometimes it's better off you just don't deal with it. Just go to the next thing. Spend your time learning something that's actually going to get you some points on the exam. Back to the phones real quick. 530 caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm George. I'm from California.
Hey, George.
And I just wanted to share my recent experience with the A+ exam.
Oh, please tell us what you've run into. Obviously, we can't say too much about any specifics on the exam, but please, what'd you run into?
There was a lot of the printer section, as you mentioned before.
Yes.
I found myself struggling with that. I ended up
for some reason, printers, and I know it's only like 2 sections at the bottom of the hardware section. That's, as I mentioned, like 15 different topics, 15 different sections in that single domain. For some reason, printer questions, there's just a ton of printer questions. And I don't know whether that's just the randomness of the questions that they choose or whether that's by design. But I always tell people, if you got some time, knowing some printer stuff sure is going to help you.
Yeah, it's a study. Just make sure that you know the book and don't spend too much on specifics. A lot of it is they'll give you scenarios and troubleshoot. It's not word for word. You don't have to know these acronyms, whatnot. Yeah, just make sure you know I'd say study the interfaces on your own, like inside a computer. Don't just take quizzes online and go into it like that. Just really make sure you know the interfaces. One
of the things I often tell people to do is go to the Google image search and you just type in motherboard, have a motherboard pop up, because you can look at these high definition images of motherboards and see if you can recognize all the different parts of it. And of course, you could also bring up the manual for most motherboards will have block diagrams telling you this is where the CPU goes, this is where the memory goes, this is where the hard drive connections are, this is your SATA connections. Sometimes those can be very, very helpful if you're planning to take that exam.
Exactly. Well, I just wanted to share my experience, and best of luck to everybody else.
That's great. Thanks, George. One of the things I think we don't often see this on Google too much, but that's pretty useful. And something I mentioned in a study group probably a year ago, which was just going to Google image search and searching out a motherboard. I'm going to do one right now. Let's go to Google. Let's type motherboard. I'll show you this in just a moment, because I'm not going to. This is where I type in Google image search. You never know what you're going to get. So if I do that on my Google image search, here's my motherboard section. So you've got all these. In fact, here's one that's even numbered. Somebody's even numbered a motherboard. I don't want to do that though. That's cheating. Let's choose this image. You know, it's a pretty decently. Could I see just that image? Let's not go to the motherboard site. I just want us to view that image. Why am I missing this this image that they have? Well, that's great. Probably not a good one to choose from that. Oh, it's only an 800 by 506. That's why. If you really want a good one, let's go to the tools. Let's change the size to be large at least. Now we'll get some high definition images. Here's one of a gigabyte motherboard. And there's the page there. But if we want to see the saved image, well, that doesn't help. That's my saved images. I don't even know. It's not even my saved images. Somebody else's saved images. And there's one's got, there's one very detailed in its analysis. So now we can go through and look at all of these images and what's there and what they have. That becomes really useful. Can I open in a new window? So this image, now it just takes you to the page. What happened to Google? Poor Google. This is where, if you're trying to figure it out, you should be able to look at this and go, okay, CPU goes here. That is a PCI slot. That's not a PCI Express. Here's memory goes here. You should be able to pick out what those interfaces are on the motherboard. That becomes really useful. That can really help you. In fact, on my pop quiz collection for the 901, there is a section that does, I do have a question on my pop quiz collection where I did an image of a motherboard and I point at things. What is that? What is this one? What is that one? So make sure you go through and look at that as well. Yeah, it's just not bringing up individual photos on mine. Did they change it? Maybe the changeover they did with Chrome. And maybe I added a little extension into mine that's messing things up too. This is where those little tips, where I've now gone into these different motherboards, I've seen them from different angles, I've looked at different manufacturers, I've gone into the specifics of it. You know, those can be really, really useful. So get as much of that quote unquote hands-on as you can. I think that's really going to help anybody that is going to help you with those pieces. There is, whenever I start breaking down any of the things I need to know for the exam, I think there are things in the exam objectives that will jump out at you and that would help you know, all right, here's a topic that would be perfect for a performance-based question. If you go back to the last year of videos for these study groups, I have a different performance-based question at the beginning of every single one of those. So if you're looking for more performance-based questions, that would be a place to go. What I tend to do is a year later, I give a similar style of a question, but it's different details of the question. So once you've gone past a year, if you go back a year from now, it's probably another fill in the blank ports question. But I tried to keep those separated by a year. So if you start looking at the replays of these, you'll start to see some topics are not repeated, but it's very similar a year ago. I try to do that intentionally because there's only so many performance-based questions there could possibly be on the exam. I realize that there's plenty of things you could do at a command line and plenty of things you can do at a fill-in-the-blank perspective, but I think it gives you a pretty good flavor of things you might want to run into. And if I'm looking through the exam, that's what I want, is to give me an idea of what I could hit. That's why I show you the YouTube video of the exam experience. I think it's pretty important. And some of the things you would run into with performance-based questions are pretty important. But ultimately, if you know the content, it really should not matter how they ask the question. Whether it's a fill in the blank, a drag and drop, being able to put things in a particular order, doesn't matter. If you know the content, you're good. You know, the performance-based question we had today was a list of topics and a list of interfaces, and you had to do these 5 different interfaces. What's 5 multiple choice questions, just in a different format. So you can think of it that way, if that helps you. Try to get through all those pieces. That's a real challenge. The thing that you do run into a lot is they go to the objectives. Now, on the exam, and I mentioned this because this does happen from time to time, CompTIA asks questions on the exam that go outside the scope of the exam objectives. It's very rare and very unusual. And so a lot of the times I'll tell people, just stick to the exam objectives. And I think some people have interpreted that to mean all you ever need to know about IT is in the exam objectives. That's not what I'm saying. Our objective for these exam objectives is to get your certification. My philosophy on certifications is that it's the beginning point for what you're doing. The certification is just the beginning. That does not mean that you now know everything there is to know about that topic. If anything, it's given you the foundation you need to know that you can build on. So whenever I say you only need to know what's in the exam objectives, I'm only speaking to how it applies to the exam and to get that certification, because I think in this particular context, that's why we're here, is to get that certification. I completely expect that once you get that certification, that you're going to build on it. That's the only way, by the way, that you're going to move up in information technology. You never stop learning in IT. I was in IT for over 20 years. I was moving from over 30 years. So moved from putting computers together and repairing those, moved into workstation operating systems, moved into networking, moved into security. You know, in every single one of those cases, up until the last day I was working for that next generation firewall company as an SE, I was still learning things. And today, I'm still learning things. So that's why I mentioned this is never the end of what you're doing. This is just the beginning. You're going to build on all of these things as you go. If you're not doing it right. You should always be learning something in IT. If you find yourself, you're kind of stuck in a rut, you're like, I'm not really where I want to be career-wise, there are plenty of places to go. You just need to learn the content. That's one of the beautiful things about this. You know, that's where it really becomes handy, is to know those details. So I think that helps me as well. If I'm trying to figure out what do I do, that's where I would go with those pieces. So make sure you look at those topics as well. I think that will help you when you're ready to decide on your exam, what do you need to know? And then after your exam, what do you need to know? All of those things work together. Well, we're at the end of another hour. Thanks for sticking with us through all of those first questions. I love the Q&A part of this, but I also like the call-ins and the open phone lines as well. I'm, of course, around all the time. You can always go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There's a Contact Us link. That's really Contact Me. It shows up on my phone. I will be able to I try to respond to everybody who asks a question there. I'm not always able to do that, but I try to get as much information to you as possible. I apologize if it's sometimes a one-liner that comes back to you, but sometimes just that's the way it, time management-wise, that's the only thing I can get to you. Hopefully, I'm able to get you the information you need, and that's a great way to contact me as well, and we can always go back and forth through whatever we may need to do. If you're already a customer, you've already bought some things on the website, there is a help desk under your member login, and you can use that as well. Either way, gets in touch with me. It's an easy way to work through those pieces. Whenever you're trying to figure out how to negotiate this, it's very easy. I'm available on the Twitter. I'm there on my website. If you ever need to contact me, it's a great way to do it. Thanks for sticking around for the first hour. Thanks for being here for the second hour. Join us next week for the Network Plus study group. It's still on Wednesday at the same time. We've also got another A+ study group a month from now. So either way, works great with me. We'd love to see you here again. Thanks for joining us this time, and we will see you next time on the A+ study group.